Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. The Quran, the sacred text of Islam, was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, more than 1400 years ago. Considered the divine word transmitted directly by Allah, this unique book constitutes a compass for the faith, morals, and daily life of Muslims around the world. However, beyond its apparent teachings, the Quran conceals deep and captivating mysteries, often unsuspected. In this video, we invite you to explore 7 hidden truths in the Quran, elements that could well transform your perception of the sacred text. These revelations will not only enrich your understanding, but they will also strengthen your spiritual connection to this timeless book. Before you begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos dedicated to the Islamic faith. Thank you for your support. And now, it's time to explore. Prepare to delve into little-known dimensions of the Quran that could change your outlook forever. In historical and cultural context. The Quran, the central pillar of Islam, was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, by the Archangel Gabriel over a period of 23 years, beginning in 610 CE. These revelations, which occurred in the cities of Mecca and Medina, address varied subjects ranging from the foundations of the faith to the principles governing the daily life of Muslims. After the death of the Prophet in 632, the revelations, initially memorized by his companions and written down on various media, were collected under the Caliphate of Abu Bakr. Later, under the Caliphate of Uthman ibn Affan, a standardized version was established to preserve the unity of the recitation and avoid any discrepancies. Today, the Quran plays a fundamental role not only as a spiritual and moral guide, but also as a source of inspiration for millions of Muslims worldwide. Of legislation, ethics, and cultural inspiration, its recitation is a form of worship and meditation, with each verse seen as a direct link with Allah. Interpretations or tafsirs vary according to traditions and schools of thought, taking into account linguistic and cultural contexts. As for translations, although they facilitate understanding for non-Arabic speakers, they cannot fully capture the richness and subtleties of the Arabic language. The first hidden truth: scientific miracles. The Quran is much more than a spiritual guide. For many researchers and believers, it also contains allusions to scientific phenomena unknown at the time of its revelation. A famous example concerns embryonic development. In verses 23:13-14, it says, "Then we place the drop of semen in a safe repository. Then we transform the drop into an adhesion. Then we transform this into an embryo. Then we form the embryo into bones, and we clothe the bones with flesh." These precise descriptions have fascinated many modern scientists, some seeing a correspondence with recent discoveries in embryology. Then we formed him into another creation. Blessed be Allah, the best of creators. This passage from the Quran, often interpreted as a description of the stages of human embryonic development, continues to inspire both wonder and debate. Quranic references to embryonic stages, which include the transformation of the embryo into a bone structure, and then its covering with flesh, fascinate modern scientists. Dr. Maurice Bucaille, in his famous work, The Bible, the Quran, and Science, analyzes these verses and concludes that the Quranic descriptions agree surprisingly well with modern embryological knowledge. This led him to assert that these revelations could not be the product of human knowledge of the time, reinforcing the idea of a divine origin. Likewise, Dr. Keith L. Moore, a world-renowned expert in embryology. Dr. Keith L. Moore studied the Quranic descriptions and affirmed their accuracy in relation to contemporary scientific discoveries. According to him, terms such as alaq, often translated as adhesion or coagulated blood, precisely describe the appearance and state of the embryo at a certain stage of its development. His research, often cited in this context, suggests an astonishing concordance between Quranic texts and modern knowledge. However, these interpretations are not unanimous. Some critics argue that the descriptions are general enough to be subject to various interpretations, thus allowing them to be adapted to scientific findings. Others believe that these passages may reflect rudimentary medical knowledge available at the time, amplified by symbolic or spiritual readings. Regardless, these reflections on the links between science and faith continue to fuel discussions, inspiring believers and researchers to explore the depth of Quranic teachings. For many, these scientific miracles constitute further proof of the divine origin of the Quran, while encouraging a dialogue between science and spirituality. Second hidden thing: the little-known stories of the Quran. The Quran contains many fascinating stories that, although sometimes lesser known, offer timeless lessons. Among these stories, some concern prophets or forgotten peoples, conveying universal spiritual and moral messages. The story of the Prophet Shu'aib. The Prophet Shu'aib, known as Jethro in biblical tradition, is mentioned in several passages of the Quran, notably in surahs 785 to 93 and 1184 to 95. Sent to the Midianite community, Shu'aib urged his people to abandon commercial fraud and economic injustice. He criticized them in particular for distorting measurements and scales, emphasizing the importance of honesty in transactions and social justice. Shu'aib warned them of the dire consequences of their behavior, but most of them rejected his call, persisting in their corrupt actions. In response to their stubbornness, led to divine punishment in the form of a natural disaster that befell them, marking their end. This story highlights essential principles such as integrity, economic justice, and fairness, universal values still relevant today. The story also recalls the recurrence of themes of resistance to prophets and divine warnings in Quranic stories. In biblical tradition, Jethro is presented as a wise and spiritual advisor, but the Quran enriches this portrait by emphasizing his role as a prophet and his message, which focused on social justice. Second, Luqman's story. Luqman, a wise and respected character, is mentioned in Surah 31, verse 12 to 19. Unlike other figures in the Quran, he is not presented as a prophet, but rather as a man endowed with exceptional wisdom. In his advice to his son, Luqman highlights universal values. The recognition of God. Luqman emphasizes the importance of thanking God for his blessings and avoiding any form of association with him, as polytheism is described as a serious injustice. Respect for parents. He urges his son to honor his parents, while specifying that obedience to God must take precedence in case of conflict. Humility and modesty. Luqman warns against arrogance and urges modesty in behavior and speech, asserting that God does not like the arrogant. Luqman's story transcends religious and cultural boundaries. Compared to wisdom figures in other religious traditions, Luqman embodies timeless moral and ethical values, reinforcing the idea that wisdom arises from reflection, experience, and spirituality. The stories of Ad and Thamud. The people of Ad and Thamud, mentioned several times in the Quran, notably in surahs 7 and 11, illustrate the consequences of pride and the rejection of divine warnings. The Ad were known for their physical power and dominance. They were warned by the prophet Hud, but despite his calls for faith and humility, they persisted in their arrogance and disbelief. As a result, they were destroyed by a violent storm. The Thamud, renowned for their architectural prowess and their rock-cut dwellings, rejected the message of the prophet Salih. When Salih offered them a divine sign in the form of a miraculous camel, they killed it, provoking divine wrath, which manifested itself in a destructive earthquake. These stories serve as a reminder that material prosperity and human capabilities should not lead to arrogance and disobedience toward God. They also highlight the importance of humility and recognition of divine blessings. Comparison with other religious traditions. The stories of Ad and Thamud recall the biblical accounts of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, where disobedience and moral corruption led to divine destruction. Likewise, Luqman's story has echoes in Jewish and Christian wisdom literature, notably in Proverbs. These parallels show that these stories transcend religious traditions, offering universal lessons about morality and faith. Third hidden thing, the abrogated verses. The concept of abrogation, nasikh and mansukh in the Quran is a complex subject that illustrates the flexibility and adaptability of divine revelation. This is the idea that certain verses of the Quran were replaced or modified by later verses to meet specific needs or changing circumstances. The principle of abrogation is based on Quranic verses such as, "We only abrogate a verse or forget it to bring in a better or similar one. Do you not know that God is omnipotent?" Surah 2106. This reflects the divine wisdom of adapting teachings to changing situations while preserving the overall goal of guiding believers. As examples of abrogated verses. The gradual ban on alcohol is one example. Initially, Muslims were advised to avoid prayer while intoxicated. Surah 443. Later, a total ban was revealed, prohibiting wine gambling and alcohol are only impurity, the work of the devil. Stay away from them so that you may succeed. Surah 590. The verse of war. The first verses only authorize defense against aggression. Surah 2:239. Later, the so-called sword verse expanded these instructions. When the sacred months are over, kill the associators wherever you find them. Surah 9:5. Theological and legal implications. The concept of abrogation demonstrates the Quran's ability to respond to the specific challenges and needs of Muslims in different eras. On a legal level, it allows scholars to identify applicable laws in modern contexts. However, the concept remains debated. Some scholars view abrogation as a limited mechanism, applicable primarily to laws and not spiritual teachings. Others see it as a key to understanding the evolution of Islamic legislation. Despite the differences, the concept of abrogation illustrates the depth and flexibility of the Quranic message, allowing its teachings to remain relevant throughout the ages. In summary, abrogation in the Quran is a complex aspect that illustrates the flexibility and adaptability of Islamic teachings. It reflects the capacity of divine revelation to respond to the evolving needs of the Muslim community while maintaining continuity with the fundamental principles of Islam. 4. Literary structure. The Quran is not only a sacred text, but also a literary work of exceptional beauty. Its complex literary structure plays a crucial role in the transmission and impact of its spiritual and moral messages. The literary beauty of the Quran. The Quran is characterized by a refined use of rhyme, rhythm, and figures of speech. These elements reinforce the depth and effectiveness of the divine message while making the text memorable and captivating. Short surahs, often recited in prayers, use regular rhymes and rhythms that make Recitation and memorization are easier. The musicality of the text is a fundamental aspect of the art of tajweed, which aims to embellish Quranic recitation while respecting the rules of pronunciation. Figures of speech. The Quran makes extensive use of metaphors, similes, and allegories to convey abstract concepts in an accessible manner. Parallel structures, where similar phrases are repeated, are used to reinforce key ideas, as in verse 3.14, which lists earthly temptations. Examples of poetic verses. The verse of light, 24:35. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. His light is like a niche with a lamp in it. The lamp is in a crystal. The crystal is like a shining star. This verse uses rich metaphors to describe divine light, a symbol of spiritual guidance and inner clarity. Verses on creation, 95:1-4. I swear by the fig tree and the olive tree, by Mount Sinai, by this secure city, that we have certainly created man in the best of forms. This poetic passage evokes divine creation with powerful and evocative images, connecting natural elements with the value of humanity. Impact of literary structure. The literary beauty of the Quran is not only aesthetic, it plays a fundamental role in understanding and memorizing divine teachings. Believers, captivated by the sounds and rhythms of the text, find in these elements an aid to spiritual meditation and ethical reflection. The mystical dimensions. The Quran, beyond its legal and moral dimensions, contains a mystical depth that has profoundly influenced the Sufi tradition. Sufism explores the spiritual aspects of the sacred text, seeking an intimate connection between man and God. In the Sufi tradition, Sufis view the Quran as a source of inner guidance and divine light. They believe that each verse carries hidden meanings, accessible only through spiritual quest and deep meditation. Interpretation of the verse of light, 24:35. Sufis interpret the verse of light, 24:35, as an allegory of the divine presence in the soul of the believer. The lamp in the crystal symbolizes the purity of faith and the clarity of spiritual revelation. Purification of the heart. To achieve this deep understanding, Sufi practices include the dhikr, a constant reminder of God through recitations, and meditation on the divine names to enlighten the mind and purify the heart. Esoteric interpretations. Certain Quranic verses are particularly significant in Sufism because of their potential to reveal mystical truths. The verse of light, 24:35, symbolizes divine guidance illuminating hearts. The verse on divine breath, 15:29, when I have perfectly formed him and breathed into him with my breath, throw yourselves before him in prostration. This passage is seen as an allusion to the spiritual connection between man and God, indicating that the human essence contains a divine spark. Impact of the mystical dimensions. The mystical dimensions of the Quran enrich the believer's relationship with the sacred text. They offer a more introspective perspective, focused on inner transformation in the quest for divine proximity. This shows that the Quran is not only a source of laws, but also a guide to deeper spiritual realization. The verse of divine unity, 112:1-4. He is Allah, the only one. Allah, the Absolute. He never begot, nor was he begotten, and there is none equal to him. Sufis perceive this passage as a sublime proclamation of divine oneness, Tawheed. For them, this verse invites them to transcend dualistic concepts to achieve an awareness of spiritual unity with God. This mystical interpretation emphasizes the need to overcome the ego to merge. With divine reality as a central, Objective of Sufi teachings. The verse of Divine Encounter 2186 expresses, "And when my servants ask you about me, then I am near. I answer the call of the one who calls on me when he calls on me." This verse is a source of inspiration for Sufis, who see it as an invitation to cultivate an intimate and direct relationship with God. It highlights divine proximity and the fact that access to His presence depends neither on intermediaries nor on particular circumstances, but only on the sincerity of the believer's call. For Sufis, this call is often expressed through meditation and dhikr, the constant reminder of God. Of influential mystical figures, Rumi, Jalal al-Din Rumi. A famous Sufi poet, Rumi explores in his works, such as Mathnawi and Divani Shams, themes linked to divine love in the quest for spiritual unity. His poems use rich imagery and metaphors to express mystical experiences inspired by the Quran. Ibn Arabi. Another major figure, Ibn Arabi, developed the theory of the unity of existence, Wahdat al-Wujud, affirming that all creation reflects divine reality. His Quranic writings highlight esoteric interpretations of the verses, emphasizing that God is present in every aspect of the universe. Al-Ghazali. Known for his synthesis of theology and mysticism, Al-Ghazali explored the spiritual dimension of the Quran. In Ihya Ulum al-Din, the revival of the sciences of religion, he emphasized the importance of purifying the soul and inner experience to gain a deeper understanding of divine teachings. In conclusion of the mystical dimensions, the mystical dimensions of the Quran reveal deep meanings that transcend literal interpretations. By focusing on introspection and a direct relationship with God, Sufis enriched the Islamic spiritual tradition. Figures like Rumi, Ibn Arabi, and Al-Ghazali played a key role in this approach, offering unique perspectives on the Quranic message, revelation, and references to other cultures. Although emanating from a specific Arab context, the Quran incorporates references to other ancient cultures. These allusions bear witness to interactions with these civilizations and reinforce the universality of the Quranic message. 1. References to ancient Egypt. The Quran frequently mentions Egypt, notably in the stories of the Pharaoh and Moses. For example, verse 28:38 records Pharaoh's arrogant words, "O notables, I know of no other divinity for you than myself." These stories serve to illustrate the dangers of pride and oppression, while placing the divine message in a historical context accessible to diverse peoples. 2. Greek and Byzantine influences. The Quran also contains stories that appear to reflect influences from Greek and Byzantine thought. The story of Dhul Qarnayn, 1883 to 101, often associated with Alexander the Great, takes up themes of justice and conquest, while giving them spiritual significance. 3. References to Mesopotamia. The story of Noah and the flood, common in Mesopotamian literature, is revisited in the Quran with a theological dimension. "O earth, swallow up your water, and O sky, stop from raining." 1144. These stories, while referring to known traditions, reinforce the universal character of the Quranic message, enriching understanding of the text. Historical context and cultural references. Placing Quranic teachings in a historical framework facilitates their understanding. By evoking stories and figures familiar to various cultures, the Quran emphasizes that its messages transcend cultural boundaries and are intended for all humanity. Reinterpretations. These allusions allow a rereading of ancient stories from a theological angle, affirming the unity and continuity of the divine message. General conclusion. The Quran, in its literary depth, transcends its immediate historical and cultural context, offering universal lessons that are relevant across time and space. Spiritual and cultural depth reveals a wealth of often hidden meanings. These dimensions, from literary structure to cultural interaction, actions illustrate the universality and timelessness of his teachings. By exploring these aspects, we better understand not only the divine message, but also its ability to resonate with diverse peoples and times. If this message has inspired you to reflect on your life and actions, please share it with others to spread its benefit. Don't forget to like and share this video, and I deeply appreciate your thoughtful comments. Until the next inspiring video, take care and stay steadfast on the path of righteousness.